And now I want to turn over to our esteemed panel, who are all acting as leaders in different capacities, just to sort of share what is your perspective on the noosphere, how can it inform leadership, what are some of the challenges that you see for yourself. And Dee Frewert is going first. You'll just share a little bit about you, what you think brings you here, and who you work for.
Hi, I'm Dee Frewert, and I work for Oracle, and I'm in the Supply Chain Management Development Organization, their Center of Excellence. I work with quite large companies on big, challenging, complex, chaotic implementations, and I get the dubious honor of helping them through those challenges. So I've seen quite a bit through my career, but with respect to looking at leadership in the noosphere, I've got just a few kinds of anecdotes and perspectives. When a large company goes through change management, they are essentially trying to go through this massive digital transformation. And that's kind of scary for many of the companies who are not technology companies themselves. And we have to hold their hand through a lot of this. The leaders, though, are the ones that really need to embrace the change and take the risk and trust the process, and also trust the technologies that they're bringing forth. They are going to be at the forefront. They have to learn new things. They have to adapt and adjust. The role of a leader in this type of situation is to really define the new normal for any of these businesses and take all their employees with them. And I would have to say that in the supply chain area, it's not just taking their company with them, but everybody that constitutes their supply chain. So where the materials are sourced, or where the materials are grown or made, all the way through the assembly processes, through manufacturing, and then through the distribution. So it's not that they're looking at change just for their company, they're looking at change for the entire supply chain, which presents a challenge today, but it is a tremendous opportunity for leaders in the noosphere to actually change their perspective on who their stakeholders are. And I think that's an important thing to look at. When we go through a complex system change in the noosphere, the project timeline is shortened. It's actually can go to zero, because the technology part is the easiest part. It's the change of culture that's most difficult. So most of these implementations will take months and months and months. It can go to zero in the ideal noosphere situation. Learning is not going through a training process. It's embedded in everything they do from the first time a leader makes a decision to transform and accept the technology. Many things get eliminated. So this is the optimistic part. You don't have dependencies on people or events or particular expertise. You don't have dependencies on decisions that an individual or a small group makes, because everybody is communicating. So communication in the noosphere allows us to go from decision to a change of state in a blink. I think that from a perspective of change management, it's no longer the management that you have to worry about. You're just going to have a due date, or a date when things change in state. And if you could imagine the noosphere giving you all the information, giving you all of the resources in order for you to make that transformation, it'll be very easy and something we will look forward to. But when you talked about financial gains, being able to reward a leader for how they actually meet their numbers. So there's the financial capital that they gain, but we're looking at social capital in the world of the noosphere, because they get to look at the entire supply chain, increase the number of stakeholders, do social good, and get the results along the way and share those successes, not just with their immediate employees, but everybody in that world. And I think your video illustrated that. So that's my perspective on how things would change in the noosphere.
Thank you. Amine Belemlih, you want to share what you're doing and maybe your perspective on the possibilities of the noosphere and leadership in business?
Sure. So I'm Amine Belemlih. I'm a professor at the UM6P in the business school of the university called Africa Business School. I'm the head of a center of excellence that deals with complex transformation in Africa. It's called Leading Transformations in Africa. So I've been mostly concerned over my 30 years of experience or so as a practitioner before joining academia. I've been really mostly concerned by how things emerge over time when they're not intentionally designed and planned. We hear that most of the time strategy eventually is not only planned, most of it is emergent. Things that you didn't know you were going to do, but you finish by doing. So I got interested in what is it that we can do to generatively cultivate that, if it makes sense. How do we cultivate the bottom up, not the top down, right? The things that, like a gardener, how do we, like the second people, how do we protect, nurture, connect, etc. So I really got into this world of complex adaptive change, systems change, and I started looking at culture, traditions, wisdom. The pool of traditions in Africa and the Arab world is full of enlightening notions that are really key for this noosphere perspective. Let me give you some examples. The Ubuntu philosophy in South Africa, in the Bantu language, it means I am because we are. It is connected to interconnectedness and sense of belonging. The hikmah notion in the Islamic and spiritual tradition means a combination between practical wisdom, ethics, and acting for the greater good. And this notion of hikmah is connected to the phronesis from the Greek word or tradition, meaning that what is it that we do to adapt in the same time to a context, but being connected to something transcendent that is beyond ourselves. And I think that's the key notion of noosphere. Let me give you another metaphor that really inspired me so much until now. Did you know that the largest living body in the planet is a fungal network of threads called mycelium, and it's actually in Oregon in the United States. It spans across 3.5 miles. And it represents approximately 1,700 football fields. It's massive. And it is a network of fungal threads that manages load balancing of nutrients, water, information between trees, between species. And actually 90% of the the soil plants get their fair share of nutrients and needs from these networks across the globes. So my perspective around Noosphere is, how about having a human and social mycelium of not threads of fungal mushrooms, but of stewards, of custodians, the likes of you, people that are connectors, nurturers, protectors, and who create space, create conditions for life to flourish. And I got to find out that in social innovation, in social entrepreneurship, in all the organizational innovations of this world, you find people like those that you didn't ask to do things, but they did, and because they believe it's good, and because they really appreciate you get connected. That's my perspective.
Wonderful, thank you. Amine, can you hear me? Yes. Next, Giuseppe, Orlando, University of Bari, and also a resident here. You have a couple sort of critical perspectives and points. Maybe you want to just share with us some of the things that you are worried about or that you think about.
Yes, because in those companies, is this working? Okay. In those companies, I've been working also as a risk manager. So for me, risks are really important. And then when we see this picture of the world, how we do interact, how we increase our knowledge. We increase our knowledge by studying and talking and connecting with others. But before, it was just physical interaction. Now is also digital interaction. So who has the knowledge, who has the power, who controls the network? Because that is a critical point. And then if this is in the hands of specific particular interest, that will drive us in a direction that may not suit well for the general public. So again, I'm concerned about these topics because I was thinking about Starlinks. Is a great invention. Is a constellation of satellites, but the space is limited. So what happens when there won't be any space for any competitor? So that is the question. And is that a private person, single company, allowed to take the control of this critical infrastructure, of our connection that, again, are not only physical, but mainly nowadays digital? So these are my concerns. And then in order, again, to have a better future, in order to have a shared happiness, I don't know how to say this, energy, whatever, we have to control that this doesn't deviate, doesn't go in a direction that collectively we don't want.
Okay, thank you. So there is possibility and there is risk, and the concentration of power and wealth is a serious risk for the noosphere, right? Okay. Last but not least, Nawal.
Oui. Donc moi, je vais faire ma présentation en français.
Ouais.
Alors, rapidement, moi, je vais m'appuyer sur mon expérience. Je dirige un centre de recherche et développement qui s'appelle Massir, qui est pluridisciplinaire. On est dans une recherche et développement appliqué et applicable dans 3 grands domaines, qui sont la microélectronique, la biotechnologie et les matériaux. Et j'ai vu, au cours des 15 dernières années, l'évolution du mindset des chercheurs, des ingénieurs. C'est-à-dire qu'on a démarré avec une population qui travaille en silo, chacun dans son département, dans son centre, avec une, comment dirais-je, une prudence par rapport aux voisins. Hein, il a peur qu'on vienne lui piquer ses idées. Et on les a encouragés, on les a poussés à travailler avec les autres équipes. Et on était surpris par le résultat. Dès lors qu'ils se sont ouverts vers les autres équipes, on est passé à des projets pluridisciplinaires et avec des solutions innovantes à forte valeur ajoutée. On est, comme je l'ai dit, on est dans une R&D qui répond à la base, qui devait répondre à des problématiques de l'économie et de l'industrie nationale. On devait s'occuper uniquement des problématiques du pays, du Maroc. Et très vite, on s'est ouvert un peu plus loin et on s'est intéressé à des problématiques continentales. Donc nos équipes ont commencé à travailler avec des centres de R&D, avec des universités prestigieuses en Afrique. Et on a réussi à développer, je cite des exemples, par exemple un kit de diagnostic du virus du monkeypox. Tout récemment, les équipes étaient à Kinshasa pour faire les validations cliniques. Donc, tout ça pour dire que le modèle économique a évolué et la performance a évolué forcément et directement. Et aujourd'hui, on n'est plus dans une logique continentale, on est plus dans une logique mondiale, plus globale. Donc, ça rejoint exactement tout ce qui a été dit sur la noosphère.
Okay, wonderful. And yeah, so maybe it's possible to sort of increase in a very short span of time the concern, the problems, the quote-unquote domain, right? It's from it's very much tribal to national to global to noospheric, right? And so I think that's the possibility that you're sort of representing in your work. And there's the risk, clearly, that on a global level, there is inequality, there is no access to leadership opportunities for everyone, for this noospheric body to work. But there could be this mycelium of some way, us as stewards, and reinterpreting that for any task, including the bigger challenges in change management and beyond, right? So we're opening up to questions if you have any. I think this is an invitation, again, not just for business, but anybody that is taking on intentional leadership, and I think we're all here in that space, if it's not only intellectual, but it's really like in practice. How can we sort of make this a grounded concept, something that does give realistic reason for hope? Anyone that wants to ask a question? Okay, so now...
I have a...
Sorry?
Here. So I have a question for four of you, addressed to four of you. What kind of change in terms of like business model should happen in order for them to be more noospheric? Because we know that the traditional business models are really driven by return on investment, but I heard that four of you shared about moving beyond silo thinking, connecting across industries, moving from basically local to global. But that requires really human capital. So I think four of you have a lot of experience in business. What it is that we need to do in order to have more value-driven business models? Thank you very much.
Okay, so what I suggest, because I think we do have some time to go to eat, and so there are a couple people raising their hand. Maybe you can just raise your hand again so we can collect the questions and then everyone can respond. There's one over here, Francis. There were a couple more questions, but yeah.
One model that I have always considered as that would be relevant for noospheric business is something that one of my collaborators has called an offer network. That means it's a way of searching for synergy where you use the capabilities of the network, the big network, the internet, supported by AI. That is that each business would post the kind of things they can offer and the kind of things they would need. And then you have an intelligent system that matches needs with offers and like that makes synergetic connections. So I would just want to suggest that, do you think that's a good idea?
Okay, so that's maybe a way of a business model. There was one question over here, and then you respond to either one of them. I want to collect, and then you can respond.
Hello, there it is. No, I'm interested in what you see as the success factors that have really encouraged that collaboration and built confidence in it over time, including things the university did in the beginning to get the momentum started to move out of that siloed way of thinking.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, there are 3 questions. One about business models that you see, one about the possibility to offer need match supported by technology, and then the practice of moving out of the silos. So maybe, is it another? Okay, so we'll capture that one, and then you decide to respond to whichever question, and we'll start with Dee.
This might be a corollary to Bliss's question. It seemed like one thing that each of you did was increase the range of stakeholders, so I'm wondering if you can address that specifically.
You start.
I'll take that. So I think it's important to look at who your primary stakeholders are. Certainly, you need to answer to them. But if you widen that circle, and as I mentioned in the supply chain, if you just look beyond your company and who your vendors are and suppliers and your third-party logistics, those are the sort of the expanded business partners. But if you even go beyond that and figure that there's an area in South America that can grow coffee beans, and you have a choice as a company to do business there or just continue with your suppliers in the areas that already benefited from you. You can change the nature, the scope, the location of the other people that could benefit. So it's spreading the benefit from the original source is one of the ways that you could do that.
Yeah, maybe I can elaborate on a couple of questions. So I'm working currently with Isabelle Delannoy, who left the conference on symbiotic economy, and we're working on regenerative business models and symbiotic business models. And actually, it's another perspective, because traditionally we try to reduce negative externalities, right? Carbon footprint and stuff. But there is another angle. I think one of the colleagues mentioned that it's a synergetic approach, and we look at positive externalities between sociosphere, biosphere, and technosphere combined. So it comes to what it takes to develop that is to invite a diversity of perspectives, of voices, and manage productive tensions between framing, between worldviews on the one hand, and on the other hand, developing a systems lens, meaning that we look at the feedback loops, the recursive effects. Because if we want to foster synergies, it takes more than planning, right? It takes a lot of skill to look at the amplification effects and the leverage points and the nodes. It's another way to look at managing systems of actors. Yeah, so that's what I can say.
A couple comments. One is about the way in which we can use AI to help investments and so on. I've been part of this process. We started from spreadsheets, internet web page in which the clients, according to some questions, could be profiled in terms of risk reward, and then they could be matched with some investment opportunities. And then you can do this, you can extend it to anything. You can extend to insurance products, to, I don't know, a car, whatever. because at the end, the principle is the same. And then you can use also AI for that. And then you have robo-advisor, expert system, and so on. And then what is the issue there? That the data. Who owns the data? Because the best system is not only the most clever and most intelligent, the best trained, but often is the one that has more data. And where the data is stored? And who controls the data? So that is the issue. I think that we need to be clear about this, because when data is in private hands, then we are at risk that, again, the data will not be used for the collective benefit. So I suggest to think twice about these kind of issues.
No? Okay. There's another comment. You want to address something else?
Yeah, I wanted to address, I think, Shima, you were interested in the change in the model. And I think many things are profit-driven, bottom-line driven. If you flip that and begin with some sense of corporate social good, social responsibility, I think that the only way that that could evolve as something desirable if there is social pressure to do that. You know, you have choices as consumers in business. Would you actually buy products from a company that didn't have a program to help anywhere in that supply chain I talked about? Or would you have a company that keeps its profits only for, you know, their interested parties? And I think bringing that forward in a social context, let the consumers decide. And I think that answer will come out.
I wanted to continue on the remark that Giuseppe made. So I think that indeed the ownership of the data is a very big bottleneck, and that's why our original idea that I and a couple of colleagues developed, some call it offer network, others call it a web of needs, but it's of course the matching of needs and offers, was that you would have a kind of a public protocol. And the example is, of course, the World Wide Web, which was developed by Tim Berners-Lee as a completely open public thing that everybody can use. And then you would, of course, need some kind of a repository, and there the model could be Wikipedia. Wikipedia at the moment is a public database of knowledge. You could have this public database of offers and needs. And also I want to note that it shouldn't be just a capitalist version. In a capitalist version, there is demand and there is supply. That means that the demand is willing to pay for the supply. But some people need things and they can't pay for it. And some people are willing to offer services and they don't need to be paid. So the whole idea was to have a kind of a mixed system where there are people that freely offer things, people who offer things on a condition, people who need things and are willing to pay, and you could have all of that, and via AI you could try to match all of them so that you have, as a company, you have some output that you don't really care about, and then it turns out that some village in Africa could use that output for whatever reason that you never thought of, then the AI could match the two.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to offer two creative ideas. Not original, not mine, but I've worked with both of them. One is Buckminster Fuller, someone who I enjoyed knowing and working with, and his World Game Plan. As an architect, he had a vision of how systems could work, and I'm alluding to Amine here with your strategic sensibility. It also ties in, of course, Norbert Weiner and cybernetics and cybernetic thinking and systems analyses. But Buckminster Fuller offers not only a game plan, but the methodology that is really concretized very systematically and smartly. Further, the geodesic dome brings it great architectural semblance that has not only the sensibility of the geodesic dome, but the philosophical, theoretical awness of the geodesic dome, which is globally understood on so many different levels. I think that you might want to consider that at your meetings when thinking about creative storytelling, to more aptly allude to Buckminster Fuller, because he certainly is a purveyor and a nascent icon in our world of the futurist thinking and possibilities and potentialities. My second offering is to consider Bruce Mau. Bruce Mau is a Canadian designer who came up with the concept of massive change. And about 5 years ago or so, he and his team in, I believe, Toronto, put together an idea of if the world could change, what would it be like? His exhibition was so astute, so brilliantly, intellectually marvelous. The design is, bar none, the highest of museum elitist artists, high art sensibility that is understood without question on so many different levels. But it traveled around the world and is still very available for anyone who wants to know. But it was the images, the designs, the sensibility that people could play within this massive change environment to learn what it could be like to be in the environment. So you're dealing with immersivity, so that's very artistic and digital in experiential design, which I think Bruce Mau is a particular genius at. So just those two offerings. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? When should we close? I'm just checking. Now. Okay, great. Now we're closing with a comment and a reference to Bruce Mau. And what rhymes is good. So thank you, everybody here on the panel. And there's one more comment to close it, to bring us down.
The last thing I want to answer, a comment regarding which kind of data then they are stored, because then you may have mass surveillance. When you go to a bank and you ask for a loan, then you are rated. And then also, we know in China, but is a possibility also for us, that you may have a social rating. So you cannot book a hotel because you did something wrong. You said something wrong. You visited the wrong website. So that's it.
All right. With further ado, thank you very much.